Okay, I've been getting a lot of questions around how does someone even build a home lab like this? And how did I go from one Raspberry Pi, which is from 2012, to now with the entire setup that you saw in my previous video? For someone who's not into home labbing but wants to get into it, it may seem overwhelming, and I get it. It would have for me too. But I'm gonna go step by step of how I started with just one device to what I have now, exactly in the way that I did and how I would suggest someone who's getting into it now. And I want to be clear, this is all about learning and personal hobby projects. This isn't about building a business or making money. This is pure enthusiast passion. So where did all of this start? It was all with one Raspberry Pi Model 2B that I borrowed from a friend. I never gave it back to him. And I know he borrowed it from another friend. So if any of you are watching, thank you so much. My whole idea was I wanted to host a little website. And if someone gets into home labbing or any of these kind of projects, the first thing that comes to mind is hosting a website. I had no different ideas, nothing unique, just a little website. But first, I had to figure out how do I even remote access the device. And that's where the journey began of hours of tinkering, figuring out how to remote access it. I spent weeks, if not a month, on getting a website ready that I could host on the Pi. With that little machine, I learned how to run Linux commands, how to set up Nginx for a web server, how to actually get a website running on my own hardware. These were the smallest things, but they were really fundamental. And that's been my philosophy from day one. Everything is project based. I noticed pretty quickly that I operate on two ways. Either I have a project in my head and I find the devices and the hardware I need to build it, or I see hardware in front of me, get an idea, and then I build it while buying additional hardware for that ecosystem to work together. So once I felt really comfortable with the projects I was working on the Raspberry Pi 2B, then I went ahead and bought a Raspberry Pi 5. Once I got the device, I did the exact same things on this, and it was fantastic. It was so fast. Everything went buttery smooth. It does have a new architecture, but I didn't even think about those things. Everything just worked. And because of the speed, I started getting new ideas on the things I could do, multiple websites on one thing, hosting a database. Because on just the 2B, I couldn't really do many of those things. Only one thing that would run really slow, but it would work. I was feeling pretty good about this project until one day the power went out and my website was not hosted anymore. And then I'm sitting in the dark and thinking, how do big companies do this? What if in one of the data centers the power goes out? Oh, I know what happens. They have multiple data centers, and if one goes down, the other takes over. But how does the other one take over? Is there someone clicking and figuring out where to send what resource, or is it automatic? And that's when I discovered Kubernetes. That's how you can host something between multiple servers. If one goes down, the other picks up. You can have different offsites. So if a whole site goes down, the other one takes over. And you can actually run a lot of this on your own hardware, especially on a Raspberry Pi 5. So back to the drawing board. Buy multiple Raspberry Pi 5s. I'm gonna start running Kubernetes on them, and then I'm gonna unplug one of them, see if the website still works, and that's gonna be my test on seeing if on one location it works. So then I bought a couple more Raspberry Pi 5s, a little tower, so they all will stack nicely in one, bought a little network switch to go alongside with them, and that's where my journey of actually building a home lab started. Then in no time, my whole cluster was fetching data from a data source, putting it into a database, putting up on a website. The website was talking to the database. It was like a lot of things that were going on, and I could unplug any one of the pies and everything still keep going. And that was the high availability redundancy part I had when the power went out. And this whole process of learning Kubernetes from scratch took me a few months. Once I was comfortable doing this on my site, I bought two more pies and I put it on an offsite at my family's place, and they were going to be backups. So anytime my whole internet site went down, that would still keep going. As my infrastructure grew with more pies coming in, they all need a network switch where you can plug in the Ethernet. So then I started looking into what network switches are. Why is a network switch with 8 ports? One can cost you $18 and the other one could be $100. And then I learned more about different network speeds, Cat 6, Cat 7, Cat 5, what the differences are, what PoE is. And that's when I started learning from just going from Raspberry Pi 5s, hosting websites, to now learning about networking. And that's where it's growing from project to project. One of these days, I was watching a YouTube video and the guy did the same thing. And he started talking about security. And he said, don't be port forwarding your internet. It is insecure. Make sure you have firewalls. And that kind of threw me for a line. I started researching how can I secure my network more. And that's when I discovered Unify. I got a Unify network switch that would allow me to network segment my devices between multiple halves. So I can have servers on one side, personal devices on one. So anytime the servers get compromised for any reason, it won't affect my personal devices. So that's when I learned about more security aspects of things. And if you've been following my videos, you can see I've gone down the Unify rabbit hole since then. I have a gateway, access point, network switch, the whole 9 yards. And as I started discovering more about what people do in their home labs, I discovered something called Proxmox, and Proxmox lets you create virtual machines. Now, Pi 5s are great, they're running my projects, but to run Proxmox, you need a x86 device. Now, my Pi 5s are not x86, and I found it the hard way trying to figure out how to install it for days just to figure out Pi 5s are ARM based processors, and these are processors that go in your mobile phones, the new MacBooks, some new Windows computers, and these are very efficient, but different architecture. Not every software runs on them. So then I figured out I had to buy a little mini PC that has an Intel or a AMD processor, and then I can run Proxmox on it. So I went on Facebook Marketplace, bought a little computer for $50 for just testing, ran Proxmox on it. Took me a few weeks, tinkered with it, and then I just learned Proxmox and virtual machines and how to just spin up a new Linux Debian environment as I go. And here comes one of my most favorite parts of my home lab, my 3D printer. Once you start getting so many devices, you want to go vertical rather than horizontal on your desk space. So you want to start mounting things up. So that's why you see a lot of server racks being tall and they stack up because that takes less space and it's easier to manage. I got this little server rack, but for that, you have to have a 3D printer so you can print custom models to mount all of your hardware on it. You can find prints from other people who also have their home labs and they've built a solution for themselves for their mini PCs, their network switches, all for their server racks. And you can just print them for yourself. Or if you want to make a modification like me, you can just go in Tinkercad and make changes by yourself. But here's the thing about 3D printing. You can only do so much with just plastic before you need to upgrade. You need brass threaded inserts so you can actually screw things together properly and have them hold over time. So I bought these brass inserts with M2, M3, and M4 sizes, which meant I needed boxes of screws in all of those sizes. And to install brass inserts properly, you need a new tool, you need a soldering iron. So I went ahead and bought a soldering iron. Once you have a soldering iron, you can do a lot of electronics projects. It opened up a whole sea of me doing electronics projects for the last few months. So since then, I've gotten a lot of ESP32s, a lot of microcontrollers, Pico 02Ws, Arduinos. I started building projects with them, and they said all of them, if I can move my camera, right here, all of them. And yet again, I had another project idea. I wanted to make my light switches smart, but I didn't want to work inside the switchboard, but rather outside. So then I had to get some motors so it can flip the switches. I had to get a microcontroller. I had to 3D print stuff. I already had the brass inserts. So I was able to make a smart switch using the things I had with the soldering iron, the brass inserts, the 3D printer. And then I started buying the microcontrollers, and that's when an ecosystem of more electronics projects built for me. From my office setup, you can see that I have 3 desks. One is where I keep all of my ESP, those electronics building projects. The other is where I keep all of my big hardware, like my server racks, my 3D printers. And then the main one is my main white desk. I understand not everyone has so many desks, but you'll be surprised that I bought this main desk while I was in college for $200, and it's a standing desk. Has been working just fine since all those years. Where I keep my electronics is a desk that someone threw out, and I grabbed it, cleaned it off, and it has been holding all of my hardware since then. And it's already pretty broken, so I can have soldering iron on there. I can break the desk, I can make holes in it, and I do not feel bad because it is already really broken and it's just a workbench. And then this brown desk right here, I got really lucky. Someone was moving into a much smaller place and wanted to get rid of this. And I saw it on Facebook Marketplace. I will take it off of your hand today. They said okay. And since then, I've had this desk and I just got lucky. Let's just put it that way. A little tip for home labbing projects is be on Facebook Marketplace. Some people just throw out stuff and they have no idea what those are. Maybe it was someone else's, they moved into a new place, someone left their stuff, and you can actually find really good deals, if not just for free, if you just get it off their hands. The next big addition to my whole home lab was the NAS that I keep right under there. I started making these YouTube videos and I'm recording on my iPhone, and the files can get really big and I did not have enough storage. So NAS is supposed to be if a hard drive dies, the other hard drives have redundancy. So even if you lose a hard drive, you do not lose all of your data. And I would like to keep all of my YouTube data on my local hardware because it's going into the terabyte and it will get really expensive for cloud storage. So here is my actual philosophy on keeping your home lab. I am a fairly clean person and I like things organized. With this much equipment, if you are not organized, it becomes chaos really fast. I make sure I organize things really well, label everything, manage cables properly. It doesn't look cluttered because I'm intentional about it. I get that it can be overwhelming for some people who do not understand what any of this is. But this has been a gradual progression. I have a full-time job, I work remotely, I work out in the same office, I work on all of my hobby and tinkering projects in the same place. So I spend a lot of time in here. It's not like I went out one day and had a list of things I needed to buy to make a home lab. Every single thing in this room had a project in mind. I wanted to build a website. Here's a Raspberry Pi 5. I wanted to build custom mounts. Here's a 3D printer. I wanted to make a smart switch. Here's some ESP32s and breadboards. And look, everyone's on different stages of their lives. Some people can afford this stuff day one, and some people just can't. Some people really want a home lab, but would rather spend their money on other things, and that's totally valid. Right now, I am in an apartment, so there are still some constraints on how much stuff I can have in here. I've converted this second room as my entire office setup and place I work out and do all of my things in. So now when I buy stuff, I'm very intentional on knowing before I buy it, where is it gonna go? If it's just gonna sit on a desk somewhere randomly for its entire time being, I do not buy it. A lot of times I will just look for an alternative that is much smaller and can just do the job for the meantime. I will give you a warning though. You watch a lot of home lab stuff videos, and like I did, you would want hardware that you may not even use for a project, but it just looks so cool to have. I had some of these Raspberry Pis. Once I was done with my project, instead of using them for another, I moved on to a different type of project, all electronics, but I kept these Raspberry Pis on just because the blinking lights from the Ethernet port look really cool. And that could actually get you in a lot of trouble with spending money on things just because they look cool, not because they're supporting your learning or any kind of project. And I have fallen into that trap a few times. So just remember, keep it project based, keep it into some direction that you want to learn and grow into, and not just it looks cool on some YouTuber's video. So that's been my journey. I have gone from a Raspberry Pi Model 2B to everything that you see in here. Do it often, and you will see a lot of those different skills that you learn from the very base will start to converge one after the other. And you will start making so much progress that you will actually be surprised that you can even learn these kind of things. I hope I addressed a lot of your questions. If I did not, please let me know that in the comments. I would love to make a follow-up video. These are things that I like to ponder over, take notes, and then make sure I convey all of the points that I think are important for a scope of this video. If I didn't cover anything, please let me know. I hope you enjoyed, hope you learned something, and until next time, peace.